It has been an emotional few days in Melfort, Saskatchewan at the sentencing hearing for Jaskirat Singh Sidhu. He's the truck driver responsible for the Humboldt Broncos bus crash last April. It killed 16 people and injured 13 others. More than 90 victim impact statements were delivered by the victims' family members. They've now concluded and court has been adjourned for the day. But before leaving the courthouse, Carol and Lyle Bronze, the parents of Dana Bronze, spoke with the media. Dana was 24 and the athletic therapist for the Broncos. She died of her injuries. Here's what her parents said this afternoon.
We don't have our daughter, who was a bit of a bright spot in our lives, and her sister and brothers don't have a sister, and her partner doesn't have a person to carry through with him, and we are devastated. I don't know. How do you describe a loss of a child? People say they can't imagine what we're going through, and I think, no, you can't, because that's so sad to think that you could even think you could imagine what we're going through.
How important has it been to be at these hearings? You've been through the whole court process now.
Well, I guess for me, I needed to be there to support the other families who are going through similar things. And of course, we're going through a lot of the similar things, but we're not going through exactly the same.
It's different for everyone. Nobody can really say they understand what the next person is going through, because I think it's different for everyone.
The CBC's Bonnie Allen has been attending the proceedings, and she joins me now live from Melfort. So Bonnie, what stood out for you today?
Well, I would echo Lyle Braun's comment that it's different for everyone. We have heard anger, gut-wrenching grief. We've also heard forgiveness and compassion. I'll tell you a little bit more of what Lyle and Carol Braun said inside the courtroom today. Now, Dana Bronze was lovingly known as the girl on the bus, the only girl on the bus, and she initially survived the crash, Andrew, and only died 5 days later from her head injury. Carol Braun says she is haunted by questions. Did Dana see the truck? Did she feel pain? Did she hear Carol the last time Carol said, "I love you"? Carol also talks about the fact that they were planning a wedding, and instead, they had to plan a funeral. She said to Mr. Sidhu, who looked up at her when she spoke to him, she said, "Yes, we walked Dana down the aisle, but we escorted a casket, not a bride." And after they delivered their victim impact statements, Lyle spoke to us more, and we asked him what kind of sentence he wants. And Lyle says that he hopes Mr. Sidhu can find some peace. He said, and I quote, "He's not a serial killer." Bronze doesn't believe that he set out that day to kill anyone, and he's not sure that a stiff prison sentence would serve Mr. Sidhu any good or would even send a message to other drivers. Another remarkable victim impact statement came from Paul and Tanya LaBelle. Now, if you remember, Andrew, amidst this tragedy, there was that remarkable twist when Xavier LaBelle was initially declared dead when in fact he had survived. And another boy, Parker Tobin, his parents believed he was alive, sat at, they thought, his bedside, but in fact he had passed away. So today we heard from the first time from Paul and Tanya LaBelle, who described their anxiety and horror when they went back and forth from the hospital to the funeral home, back to the hospital and back to the funeral home, because they weren't convinced that any of those boys belonged to them. In fact, they asked police to take police dogs out into the cold field, thinking that there must be one more person out there because they couldn't recognize their son. And when they finally accepted that the battered body of one of those boys must belong to them, they grieved over it, only to discover it wasn't their son. And 2 days later, they got the phone call, and Paul LaBelle says joy sprang out of their grief. But since then, they have suffered mentally, and their son Xavier continues to suffer physically. So really incredible stories of grief and tragedy today, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. And so, Bonnie, what should we expect now that these victim impact statements have concluded?
Well, tomorrow we'll move into the legal portion, and this is when we will finally hear what defense and Crown think an appropriate and reasonable sentence would be for Mr. Sidhu. They will, of course, cite mitigating and aggravating factors. They will refer to case law, so it will be a much drier argument tomorrow. The sentence is wide. It can vary from a fine or probation to possibly 14 years in prison. So they will lay out their arguments as to what they believe Mr. Sidhu should serve.
Bonnie, thank you. The CBC's Bonnie Allen in Melfort, Saskatchewan.